Morning. I'm going to give my phone to Brigida. Well, actually, I'll introduce Brigida first.
Hi,
Brigida. She's going to be doing some of the teaching, and I'm going to do some of the others. So she'll put it on me, and I'll introduce me. I'll teach you. One moment. All right. Good morning. My name is Carol. As you said, we're from Northeast Indiana at the moment. Brigida's from Kentucky, but she came up here to join me for this. So the first thing we're going to talk about is fire building, fire safety, and you need to keep in mind. For your safety, make sure that you build your fire ring. You've got your fire bucket, you've got some water, you've got a shovel, rake. You need to be able to contain that fire and then douse it when you're done. To make your fire ring, you want to rake away any debris. If you have some rocks, you can outline it with rocks and then make an outer circle so that you have two circles. And only the fire tenders, or when they're working on a food, to be on the inner circle, well, in between the two circles. Today we're making do with what we have. I'm in my brother-in-law's driveway, and we have a couple of fire rings. You want to make sure your hair is tied back. Use caution on the fire ring. Never leave your fire unattended. If you're with youth, you may want to designate one person as a fire tender, and others need to stay away from the fire.
Carol, we're getting quite a bit of feedback, Carol.
Okay. Yeah,
Quite a bit of echoing.
Brigida, are you still with us? We might be switching phones, so.
You should be on the one labeled Carol.
Carol, okay, yes, we can hear you good, Carol.
Okay. All right, good.
Awesome.
So again, when you're cooking with youth, you want to designate one person as the fire tender so the others aren't throwing things into the fire. They like to throw sticks and leaves and other combustible material into the fire. So designate one person who's only allowed, that kind of helps control the chaos. Caution the youth about when they're using roasting sticks, pudgy pie makers, not to be swinging them around wildly because they might have a flaming marshmallow and someone might be behind them. And also tell them no running in the area. Fires need oxygen, heat, and fuel. Your fuel is dry wood. You don't want to transport wood from one area to another area because you could bring insects from the first area into the second area and cause some major issues there. So fire starters are awful handy. I have a few samples here. One of the easy ones to make, you can call it the KISS, and it's wax paper. It's dryer lint, and you can put a candle inside to help with the longevity of the burning of your fire KISS, and then just twist it as you would a KISS. I have one here with sawdust and wax and a wick, and it's a paper souffle cup. You can also make it with a cardboard egg carton, and you can put either a piece of charcoal or sawdust or your lint, and then pour some melted wax over that, and then you tear off one egg cup and use that for your fire starter. There's commercially available fire starters. You can use pine cones. And then for lighting your fire, there's magnesium fire starters, matches, and you may want waterproof matches or make your own where you take a match and dip it in some wax. And then you can carry it in, if you have any old film canister containers or a medicine bottle, you could carry them in there to help keep them waterproof. You can spark with 000 steel wool and 9 volt by rubbing it across the positive and negative poles. You've got your butane lighters that you could use. Back to the charcoal, don't let me forget. All right, so there's several types of fires that you can make. And what you want to do is consider what you are making your fire for. If you're making it for a long evening where you're sitting around the campfire, a lot of people, and you want a big bonfire, you may want to make a log cabin. So you're going to take your wood and crisscross it. And then you're going to keep going. And inside you're going to want to lay some, okay, backing up, we have tinder, which is the very tiny wood, which is smaller than your pinky. You have kindling, which is about the size of your thumb or a little bit larger. And then you have your fuel, which are your logs. So when you gather your tinder and kindling, you can make a little teepee-like. And you could, if I had dirt, I could stick them in the dirt. And you gather your tinder and your kindling, and you can put your fire starter under there. And you would make this, and you would put it inside of your log cabin. Light your fire starter, your tinder and your kindling will light and then spread. And you'll need to continue to add some kindling until your fuel catches fire. Another one that I like is an A-frame. And I make an A with my fuel. I'm going to make my pile of tinder and kindling in the center here. And then you can take some of your, and my fire starter. And then you can lay some of your tinder and kindling over it, light your fire starter. And if you need to, you can take a paper plate or something and fan, and that will help the flames catch your tinder and kindling on fire. You can also make a teepee, same thing with sticking your wood in the ground, making it into a teepee, and then laying your tinder and kindling around it. Once you get it lit and have it going, then you can add your fuel. That one's good if you're roasting over a fire or if you're going to be using a tripod. There's lean-tos, there's, talk about the A-frame, there's an upside down fire where you start with the fuel at the bottom and you gradually get smaller with your little smaller fuel, then your tinder or kindling, and then your tinder on top. You light your tinder and then it burns down your stack, and that's a long burning fire also. Make sure you know your local rules for campfires. If you're going camping on some various properties, make sure you know what the rules are for burns and if you need a permit. Now, starting charcoal, it's really easy with a charcoal starter. Over here we have one that's a permanent setup. It doesn't pull down nicely like this one. So this one folds down. Pretty handy. You can carry it in a bag with your Dutch oven. It has a grate that will fold down inside. You're going to put your newspaper underneath. And then you will put your charcoal on top and you will light it from the holes underneath. Your newspaper catches fire and then it gets your charcoal. Charcoal burning takes about 20 plus minutes to get the larger can to where we can use the charcoal. And now we go on to tripod.
So we have to switch camera persons.
Okay.
So, because I was traveling and whatnot, we live in an apartment, so I do not have readily access to logs, large sticks to use. So I just visited the local hardware store, picked up some dowel rods to be able to transport with me. So for making our tripod, we start off by making a clove hitch. Hitches are something that are intended to be temporary, just hitch something together. We have a standing end, which is the end that just stands there. And then we have a working end, and that's the end that we're going to be utilizing. So I have my long standing end. I'm going to take my shorter end, my working end, and I'm going to wrap it around my dowel rod twice, and it forms an X here. And I'm going to take this tail of my working end, I'm going to tuck it underneath that X. When I pull both ends, tighten it up, it's going to form either an H or an I, depending on which direction that you're looking at it. But you should have your tails going opposite directions to each other. So I'm going to snug it up a little bit, slide it down a little ways. All right. So now that I have my clove hitch, I'm going to do my weaving. And so I'm going to just weave over and under my poles, back and forth. And as I do it, once I've done a full weave, I'm going to scoot my twine down, or whatever it is that you're using, and I'm going to pull it tight. I'm going to do my weave again. I'm going to scoot it down, and then I'm going to pull it tight. Just because I want to try to get it as tight as I can. And you want to do this 3 or 4 times. Your over and your unders. All right, once you've done your over and under, you're now going to do what's called frapping. And that's where you're going to take it and you're going to wrap it around your weavings in between each set of poles. And what this does is this is going to help tighten up the weave. Helps keep it from slipping and just makes it generally tighter so that it will hold position when we go to spread our tripod. All right, I've done it 3 times. I'm going to go around my next side. One, 2. One more. All right, so I've done this all the way around. So now I'm going to tie another one of those clove hitches. So I'm just going to wrap it around my pole, make my X. You can see the X there by where my finger is. And I'm going to tuck that tail up underneath that X. Pull it tight, and that keeps my frapping from weaving itself back around. Okay, now I can stand my tripod up. My 2 outer poles go out the same direction to lock into place. My center pole goes opposite. Now I do have a coat hanger here. I'll be right back. That you can take the end of it, bend it around so that it goes around the handle of your bean pot. And now I can hang my pot. Kind of depends on where your fire is. You can adjust appropriately. And then one of the cool things about the hanger method is I can adjust how low my pot is if I need to. Squeeze my hanger in or squeeze my hanger up. You can also take a loop of rope, tie it around the handle of your pot, and then just loop it around over the top. So it makes it real easy to be able to just take your bean pot off and take it off to the dinner table. Any questions on the fire building or on the tripod? All right. Well, now that we have a
I
tripod,
have a question real quick. I'm sorry, I couldn't get unmuted fast enough. If you don't have a charcoal starter, what are some tips for starting charcoal if you don't have one of those like little chimney things?
Okay, if you can lay it on, you can lay it somewhat closely packed together, and you can put some newspaper like in the center core underneath and light the newspaper, and it will get the charcoal burning if you've got it fairly closely lumped together. It might take a little bit longer to get all of your coals heated up, but you might have to move them around too. And you can see our charcoal starter here. We've got some nice glowing coals in there. Kind of warm holding them right here. So just keep them close together, and you might have to rotate them and add some more on top as they start to catch on.
All right, so now that we have a tripod, I think it's Nancy's turn so she can make something to put on that tripod.
Okay, back to you, Nancy.
All right, Nancy, Courtney, DJ, you guys ready?
Yes. We ready to put some soup on? All right, so with the, I'm going to use some cast iron today, and I've got a couple of different pots sitting out here if you want to look at. So this one is what a lot of times people call a bean pot. If you look, it's got the dome lid on it, and there's no legs on it. So this would be one that would be one you would hang over a fire if you're cooking over a campfire. The other one you're going to see me using is this one right here, which has the legs on it. A lot of people call these Dutch ovens, and some people refer to them as spiders because they have legs on them. And if you look at the lid, it's a little different. Instead of being domed, it's got like a little lip here. The advantage of this kind of a cast iron is that if I just had coals or charcoal that I wanted to cook with, then I can use this with the legs here and put some charcoal underneath. I can also sit some here on top without worrying about it getting actually into my pot. So we're going to use both today out here to hopefully fix up some lunch. I am a big fan of one pot meals where I can throw everything in one pot, hang it over the fire, and let it cook, especially those kind of meals that you don't have to worry about really overcooking them. And so soups are oftentimes a good option. One of the ones a lot of times I like to do because it is easy to do. You throw it in the pot, put it on the fire, and it's not something you really have to keep an eye on and make sure it's going to get overcooked or something like that. So we're going to fix one that's pretty popular around our house today. It's called Tuscan bean and sausage soup. Now, the ingredients I'm using, I'm going to be using a little bit more than maybe I sent you in the recipe, only because there's a few of us here working together. So I want to make sure I got plenty for everybody to eat. So you may see me adding this a little bit more than what I put in the recipe. The recipe I gave you easily feeds 2, 3, 4 people. We have a few extra people around. I want to make sure I just didn't run out today. So I did a little bit of prep work today where if you looked in the ingredients, one of the ingredients was the Italian sausage. Sometimes at home, what I'll do is I'll just break it apart or tear it or cut it up and throw it in the pot without pre-cooking it. I went on and pre-cooked the onion and the sausage because with a little bit more of a time limitation today, I wanted to make sure that we had this done by lunch today. The other advantage to cooking it ahead of time is if you just throw it in there without it being cooked, sometimes the meat will break apart, which is no big deal to me. Sometimes it's easier if you just want to throw something in the pot and have something to eat later on. If you want it to look pretty though, you might go ahead and cook it up, brown it up ahead of time, because then it's going to stay in these neat little meatball kind of package deals. So I pre-cooked this partly because today I'm going to show you what that looked like, and I want to make sure we had plenty of cook time for our meal. So I'm going to go ahead and put that in our pot here. It's going to be my first ingredient in, and that is the sausage and the onions. That's all it's in there. Okay, we're going to add that in. So we got that. It also asks for the diced tomatoes. And again, this is another example. I got my cans a little bit bigger than what I told you all. Again, just because I'm making a little bit bigger recipe for everybody here today. So we're going to add that in. And you can get creative. Sometimes you can use a different already seasoned tomatoes. Sometimes people do that. If you don't like the diced tomatoes, you can do the juice or whatever. It's going to cook down a lot, so you're not going to really notice that. I'm also going to add a can of beans to my recipe. I usually use some kind of white bean in it, whether it's navy beans, you know, the different ones. But again, the fun part of it, these one pot meals is you can add pretty much whatever you want. So I'm going to dump those in here to get those going. My 3 cans. We drained these, so I'm not adding that liquid to my soup. We already drained those out because my liquid is going to be those tomatoes, and I'm getting ready to add some chicken broth to it. Now I waited on the chicken broth to last because my pot here is definitely big enough to hold this whole carton, but not everyone's cast iron, if you're using cast iron today, may be that size. So I always wait to last on this to make sure. I'm going to just add enough to fill my pot up. So I wanted that weight and make sure I have plenty of room for all those good ingredients there. So we're going to dump all of this in here because I know this bean pot can hold all of this, and get it in there. I'm going to add a little bit of seasoning to it as well. So I got a little bit of garlic here. I'm going to toss a little bit of that in. Get that going. And again, this is to taste. If you don't like it, don't put it in there. We're going to put a little bit of that in there, and then a good dose of this Italian seasoning. In fact, I'm going to skip that part. I'm going to put a good dose of that in there and stir it up. So easy peasy. All right, all my ingredients are now in this pot. All right, so I'm going to give it a good stir here, get all those ingredients mixed together. And the thing that's taken me the longest so far was just to brown that meat, to cut it up and brown it. So at this point, this soup is ready to go on the fire. What I'm going to do when I hang my pot, like I said before, we've had this fire now going since Friday. We've got about a foot of coals in there. We don't have a lot of flames going right now because it may not look that hot right now, but we've got a pretty hot fire. If I was hanging this over flames, and we may dig it up a little bit just to show that, because we all like to watch those flames when we're cooking. What I'm going to do is make sure the flames stay below my pot. I don't want them up on my cast iron. That's going to get a little too hot around the edges. It's going to make it a little too hot in the pot. So a lot of times I'm going to get it right above my flames, or maybe a couple inches between my pot and the flames to go ahead and let it cook. So I'm going to get this on there. We got a good hefty dose here. I hope you guys are hungry later. Boom, lunch is on the stove. We want to go and do the Dutch oven with the lava cake. I'll do it because I know we want to eat here later. So I have a number 10 size pot. If you look a lot of times, depending on what kind of cast iron you're using, there's usually a number on there. It's going to give you an idea how big. In this particular pan, if I was going to buy more cast iron, I would not go any smaller than this if I was looking to make some bigger dishes. This is about as small as I want to go to make some of the cobblers and the peaches and things. And in fact, a lot of times I may even go a little bit bigger than this one for that, depending on how many people you're going to be wanting to feed. Now with this one, I am making a dessert. Desserts have a lot of sugar in them. Some people will use the liners in the cast iron, or they'll use aluminum foil in there to make that clean up a little easier. If I'm out camping, I might consider doing that because you don't have that handy dandy sink. You can't just walk in there and wash it out and clean it out. So those can be handy at times. I tend to want to avoid them just because, you know, it adds something else there between my food and the cast iron, and I like that cast iron. But with that sugar in there, sugar sometimes can stick. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to use a little bit of the cooking oil, and I'm going to just give it a quick dose here. My pan is good and seasoned, but with that sugar, I'm going to just give it a little extra help there to make sure. So with this particular dessert, this is called cherry chocolate lava cake. And I'm just going to warn you now, once you try it, if you like chocolate, you're going to like this cake. All right. So again, easy meals. Okay. A lot of people, when they're doing the cast iron, one of the easy ones to start with is some of these dump cake kind of deals. They're easy to make. They're quick to make. They're not real hard to do. So those are kind of fun to start with. There's all kinds of cobblers and cakes out there, but those kind of dump cake kind of things are some of the ones a lot of people like to do over the campfire. And that's kind of what this is. I'm just going to dump some stuff in. One is I got cherry pie filling here. So I'm going to get this in my pot and get that spread out here. I think I'll move my spatula over there. DJ, will you grab my spatula out of that pan over there for me, please? We got that in the mix while he's grabbing my spatula so I can spread that out. I picked out a chocolate cake mix. And of course, being the one who likes chocolate, I got the one that's got a lot of chocolate in it. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. A little extra in there. I don't want to waste that because we're going to eat that. Make sure I get all that out. I'll spread it over the bottom of my cast iron. Get all that around because that's going to be the base of my cake. All right. We're going to take the cake mix. Again, big fan of these dump meals. All I got to do now is dump this over the cherry pie filling. So I'm just going to spread it out Get it spread around.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
I was frantically putting all my soup ingredients in. What was the first thing you put in there for the?
I think the first thing I added was the sausage. And
No.
the
I'm sorry. For the cobbler.
Oh, for this one, my bad. The cherry pie filling, and that's just the particular one I have. The cherry pie filling, or whatever filling you want to use on it. This is one of those meals where it's whatever you like, you can put in there. We've done peaches and like yellow cake mix. It all works the same, but in this particular recipe, I use the cherry pie filling, and then I use the chocolate cake mix on top of that. That's all that's in there at this point is the cherry pie filling and that dry cake mix. I'm gonna spread this out a little bit, make sure it's all spread out through my pan. And then any kind of like lemon lime drink is what we're gonna use next. 1 can, if you got the cans. How about the bottle? Because we made a few of these this weekend. So I'm gonna add about 1.5 cups of this to my dish. Now when I do this, I'm gonna do it slow. I'm gonna just dump it on there and it ends up like one spot. I'm gonna do it slow and kind of spread it out over all of it. So it's kind of, so I'm making sure I cover all my cake mix as best I can. So I'm not making one big hole with all of it in it. I'm gonna try to spread this out. And again, it's really good and it's really easy because that's it. We got cake mix in there, we got cherry in there, we added that. And given that, again, I'm a little bit of that chocolate colic. You want to add a little bit more to it. Pick your favorite chocolate chip. I'm going to spread those over on top here. It's going to mix in with my cake mix. And that now is ready to go. So put on top here. And I'm going to use my charcoal on this one. Now, because I got fire and we've got firewood laying everywhere, when we told our maintenance guys we needed a campfire this weekend, they thought bonfire, which is the reason you see all this crazy amount of wood sitting around. So I'm going to keep everything here in the charcoal pit or in our fire pits so that I know where our fire is at. So using my tongs, and these are really handy dandy if you're going to be around a campfire very often. Restarted these a while ago. Now with fixing stuff in this kind of cast iron, if you Google it or look on Pinterest, one of our favorite places to look, you're going to find all kinds of things that talks about charcoal and how much to use and where to put it. So in this case with baking, most often what I'm thinking of is that I'm going to put about twice as many on top as I am the bottom. So I got heat coming from top and the bottom. So I spread, I think 6 of them out right there, and I'm going to sit this down on top of it with those legs. That heat now is underneath my Dutch oven. And then got about 6 down there, so I'll put a few up here. Now, I may not put as much as I would if I was just cooking with my charcoal because we are in this fire pit, so I know our fire is staying put. So, and this fire is really hot. Like I said, we've had this fire going now all weekend long, so I'm not going to need to add a whole lot of heat to my pot here for this to start cooking. But again, if I was out and this is the way I was cooking with charcoal and just charcoal, I'm putting about twice as many charcoal briquettes, that word I can't have a hard time saying right now, on top as I would the bottom. And now I'm just gonna watch this cook. Now, if you're like a lot of cooks, a lot of times you know how you want to open the door, lift the pot lid. One thing right now is be patient with this. It's going to take a little time to cook. Hopefully by the end of class, I think by the end of class it's going to be done. But what I want to do right now is I want to leave those lids alone. I don't want to be tempted right now to undo it, to lift those lids up, because as it starts to trap that heat, that's what's doing the cooking. Same thing they always tell us about, don't open that oven door. Kind of same thing we're going to do right here is we're going to leave those and let them sit for a while, and hopefully by the end of class, we'll have some good food for you all to look at. So that's got our Dutch ovens going. Is there any questions about our meals here or about our cast iron hanging right now?
I have one question. If you're out and you're camping and you don't have charcoal, do you just put like your pieces of burnt wood on the bottom and on top?
Yeah, I'll do that.
And just try to do about the same sizes?
Yeah, if you look, we've got, once you get these coals going, it's essentially the same thing. Just be mindful of how hot you think it is. With charcoal, I think you can kind of keep in your head that each of those, if you got good charcoal, I'll be honest, I bought cheap charcoal and it's not as hot as what maybe some of the more expensive charcoal is. each of those little brick can put out maybe 10 to 15 degrees of heat. So you just got to do the math. If you got a dish that you want to cook at 350, you do your math there to kind of get an idea how much heat you want to put on it. So with the wood, you just kind of have to think about how hot that might be. The wood sometimes burns down, depending on, like this charcoal stuff here, it's holding heat pretty good right now. Just kind of have to watch it a little bit, and if it burns completely out, you just got to keep replacing it so you keep your heat going on your dish. So hopefully that makes sense and helps out.
Yes, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
Other cool questions? Yeah, give us about a half hour, 45 minutes, and I wish we could send you the smell. It's gonna be pretty good. All right, so we're gonna jump back up into Indiana, I believe. We're gonna
Greetings
work with.
again.
Yep.
You were asking about charcoal. If you didn't have charcoal, here we put our Dutch oven on our fire because we want to conserve our charcoal for some of the upcoming lesson here. All righty.
I have one more tidbit I'd like to pass on back to the bean soup pot. Nancy was using her Dutch oven. We are not using a Dutch oven. We're using just a metal pot. An insider tip from years of experience is before you put that pot on your fire is to put some dish soap on your hands and lather it around the exterior, the outside of your pot, the bottom, the sides, up around where the handle notches down and everything. And afterwards, all that black stuff that goes on your metal pot is going to come right off with washcloth. You're not even going to need to do any scrubbing. So that's my insider tip. All right. So for today, I decided I'm going to do some muffins. Yesterday I did brownies. Today we're going to do some muffins here in place of brownies, and then I'm going to be doing pieces in my reflector oven. And I know that's something that we had you all do as homework ahead of time, just to kind of save time a little bit. So I've got my reflector oven here. Now, one thing I did discover, the racks that I intended to use do not actually fit widthwise across my reflector in my box. So I had to turn it this direction. And today, we might actually get more reflector activity than we did yesterday. Yesterday here in northern Indiana was a very gray, overcast day. There was not much solar activity happening. So we assisted it with coals yesterday. So today we're going to start off and see if we get enough reflector activity. If not, I'm just going to put some coals underneath and I'm going to assist my reflector activity here. So I've already started with my mix. So I'm going to make up my mix for my muffins. I have a mini muffin tin with me today because I know this mix doesn't make a whole lot. It's not one of those big ones, make it for my entire fourth graders class sort of thing. So I figured the mini muffin pan might be just right for this. We're going to have some raspberry muffins. We opted for blackberry in our lava cake. So we're just mixing it up with our berries over here. I spray my muffin tin. Spoon it in, and then I'm just going to let it sit right here in the oven and let the sunshine hopefully do all of its activity. Because of how I have my reflector oven sitting, you'll notice the door panel is down on the ground. That allows me to adjust it up and down as needed for the angle of the sun. We're spooning, we're spooning. I hear something cooking over on our fire. A little sizzle going on. All right, I think I made a good choice using the mini muffin tin for this particular batter. It's gonna fit just right. A little bit more. I got one or two here that's a little on the low side. Fill them up just a little bit more, and we'll be ready to go. Now, I'm going to share a little story. My kids and husband and I do some camping. We like to go out every Labor Day camping. We like to tent camp. We don't have a camper, but we do camp in the RV campgrounds of the state parks because we have a CPAP involved. If he sleeps better, everybody sleeps better. The weekend goes better for everybody. So here we are camping, and we like to do creative cooking. Box up just a little bit here. There we go. So I've got some good sunshine coming in here, and again, if that doesn't quite get it, then I'll switch coals and help it out. But we'll see about how that works. So my parents are cooking with us, visit camping for the weekend. We did some box oven, we did some reflector oven, we did the pot pie in the terracotta pot. Just some creative, fun things. And then one afternoon, a gentleman comes over from one of the RVs. And what all have you been doing over here? We keep seeing things come out. You've had boxes, and you were over whacking something on the table with hammers on yesterday. You know, just we're curious. So I shared with him what we'd been doing. We also happen to make clay chicken, where you wrap your chicken with clay, put it in the oven or in the fire, let it cook, and when you're done, you beat the clay off of it. All right. So I have my sauce on my pizza crust, by the way. I switched gears. Gonna add a little of this extra Italian seasoning since we were already using it for the bean soup. Let's have salami on it today. And I'm gonna add some spinach as well. So, yeah, the gentleman who had come over from the RV camper seemed quite impressed with what we've been doing. You know, this is all new stuff for him. Well, thanked us for sharing and went on back to his business. The next night there was a torrential downpour. So we set up the coals in the pedestal grill that comes with the campsite. Stood there with foil over the grill, keeping the coals dry while they heated up and got hot. Meanwhile, under the gazebo, we pulled the box ovens back out. We happened to be making pizzas that night, made pizzas, brought the coals inside, and we had dinner despite the torrential downpour occurring outside. So dinner was saved. All right, so I have my lovely pizza. I am now going to set it in the reflector oven as well. Again, we're going to see what the sunshine can do for it, and if need be later, we'll just do a little assistance. All right, any questions on our reflector oven? Okay. All right, switching camera peeps.
Okay, we're talking about hobo dinners now. And when I was doing a little bit of research looking for what I wanted to make, came across a anecdote that was mentioning that hobo dinners got their name from the Depression, when you had the hobos who would jump the trains and travel from town to town, and they would eat whatever they could find. So they'd gather up the food that they could find, they'd throw it all in the same container, probably an old tin can, and cook it. And so it got the name hobo dinner. You can put just about anything in a hobo dinner that you want, according to your flavors. You can use fresh vegetables. If you don't want to wait that long for your potatoes and carrots to cook, you can get canned potatoes and carrots. You can get frozen mixed vegetables. You can use any meat. If you want meat in your foil packet, we found that when you're making hamburgers, you can mix some French onions, dry soup mix in, and that makes it quite tasty.
I like to slice an onion and put it on the bottom and then put my meat patty on top of that. That helps minimize the burning to my meat patty. So I've already mixed my ingredients together. Today I've got sausage, which is fully cooked already. I have carrots that I've sliced thinly, onions and potatoes. A combination of seasoning that was mailed out to you is what I'm using. I did spray the foil with a little bit of cooking spray first, added some butter for seasoning. Now this is one of my favorite slicers. It's inexpensive, it's adjustable, and it works great. You just put your hand on it, you adjust it to how thick you want your slices, and you hold your thumb on it and you slice, 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 slice. And it's a lot quicker for me than using a knife. And a lot easier to clean up than using one of the fancy gadgets that come with my KitchenAid. So when you want heavy duty foil, and you're going to seal your packet, you want to make sure it's sealed well because it's going to be flipping on the fire several times. Now, if there's several packets on the fire, you either need to remember where you put it on the fire or you need to mark it in some way. Sometimes a black marker will stay on and you can mark it with your name. The other way is to get creative with your packaging. So here we have our little swan. You only want one layer of foil. If you're doubling up on foil because maybe your foil wasn't large enough, the first one that you pulled off, it may not cook as well or as quickly. Depending on what's in there, you may need up to 30 minutes. We found with our package yesterday that we really only needed about maybe 15 minutes because of how thin everything was sliced. So we're going to put that over on our fire. There goes my swan flying over to the fire. We're just going to tuck it in there, and periodically we'll come over and we will rotate it and turn it so that all sides get the heat evenly. Any questions about foil dinners?
Can you put those on charcoal too?
Yes, you can.
Other questions? All right, we're going to switch camera, peeps. All right, time to use our other box. All right. Today I'm going to be making cornbread. Just trying to switch it up a little bit from different things from yesterday, and I thought the cornbread might go really well with that bean soup. So I'm running a little bit of oil around in my pan. I had already pre-measured my egg and my milk so that it was ready to go. I'm going to add my mix. And again, you'll notice I have a smaller pan because I know these little jiffy mixes are on the smaller side. Wouldn't do my family of 4. But for just Carol and I here, I thought they would do just fine. So I'll mix up my cornbread mix. And I'm going to be putting it in my pan. Now, if anybody did notice, again, the insider tip and trick, yes, this is a piece of stoneware that I have. Stoneware is designed for oven use. It is not designed unless you have the special stoneware specifically designed for campfire use. And I say that because I learned that the hard way. My favorite 9-inch square baker is no longer a 9-inch square baker because I tried to use it in the campfire. It is now good for catching the drips under my rain barrel. So I am using the stoneware since it will be going into my oven and not into the campfire. All right. So pouring my cornbread mix in. Spread it around so it's fairly evenly spread here. I'm gonna finish getting my oven ready. We had to do your oven the other day. I've got my coals over here, so now I'm gonna move my coals over into my box. I'm setting mine directly on the bottom here. Well, I suppose actually I can put them right here in my pan because I'm going to be setting that on top of my pan. All right, 4, 5, ooh, double, 6, 7. 2 halves equal an 8. A 9. Dig down here and get an extra hotter one. And a 10. I'm going to start with 12 of them here. I may need to add a little more later. We'll see. All right. I'm going to put my pan up here on top. Put the rest of my box over the top. And you do not have to do it this angle. You can flip it upside down and load from the top if you so choose. Again, reflectors and box ovens are very, very versatile. You can mix and match them. You can use a box as a reflector or a reflector as a box. I just have different angles for it. So I have that in there, and it is just going to sit and cook for us. Okay, I'll check back in it in a short bit here while we continue moving on.
Show you how our muffins are rising here.
They are rising so that I can see they're getting some heat, and I'm actually seeing just a little bit around the edges where they're getting kind of when you pour pancakes and it gets that dry edge around the side. That's when you know when to flip them. Well, I'm starting to see that a little bit with my muffins. So we certainly are getting some reflector activity here. So I'll keep my fingers crossed that we continue to get enough reflector activity. So, all right, the next one is that reflector pot pie that I told you about. This comes courtesy of my mother. Girl Scout leader for years. We did lots of family camping. She likes to be creative. So I have my phyllo dough. I did start with a clean pot, fresh from Menards. Washed it out anyway. But if you do upend one of your flower plants, make sure that you clean it good there so that it's fresh and ready to go. I'm going to take some sheets of my phyllo dough, and I'm going to line my pot with it. Depending on the size of your pot, your phyllo dough is probably going to be bigger than your pot is tall, and that's okay. You leave some of it hanging over the edge because you'll need to wrap it up over the top as your crust, top crust. The bottom of it, you're going to have multiple layers on the bottom. That's what keeps your pot pie from dripping out the bottom. And I found when I have done this that it takes me about 3 sheets to go all the way around. They overlap a little. And there is no precise and fancy way to do it. You just kind of tuck it in down there at the bottom. This is not precision cooking. All right, so I have that down at the bottom. I pre-made my pot pie mix. Shake it up, get it ready to go. You can also be versatile and use chili. You can use beef stew, pretty much whatever you want.
What did you put in that pot pie mix? Sorry.
For this particular one, I used a bag of frozen stew vegetables. I diced up some cooked chicken, and I used a cream of chicken soup. I put it in the crock pot overnight just to let it thicken a little bit because I was going to be transporting. But you can also buy, there's a chicken pot pie oven sauce that works really well for this kind of thing. You mix it with your vegetables and your chicken, or you can make from homemade as well, just using chicken stock and some thickener. So I'm going to take and I'm going to be folding over my top, tucking it in like a little baby. Okay.
Can you use like a can of beef stew, like in a soup aisle, like to put in that?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay.
While we're here, we're going to flip the bird.
Oh,
Flip my swan.
toss the swan. There we go.
Yep, we're turning my swan. Try to make the heat even on the swan.
Move it over a little bit so I have a spot to put in my pot pie. Right there. I can come back later. I may need to move it over to our other space. Our soup is looking delicious over here. Nice and bubbling hot. All right. I have one more to show you before I turn the show back over to the others here. And that is, we're going to do our solar panel.
And that's your shadow.
Huh? All right. I'm moving around because of shadows here. I'll step to this side. All right. So I made the family sacrifice for me. I haven't eaten breakfast.
Hey, Carol, can you make sure, I think the mic might be blocked or something. Can't hear you too well.
Well, no, it's not blocked. I'm not muted, am I?
No, you sound a little better now.
Okay. Thank you. So I have cut out a window here. If I was doing a little smoky, perhaps I could use a small window, but because I was doing a hot dog here, I'm doing a bigger window to it. Okay, and I've just cut out this little window here. You can use the extra piece that you cut out and glue it on so that it has a stand and it doesn't roll if you so choose, or you can just find a stick, a rock, or something to prop it up if you need to change the angle on it. I have poked a hole on this end, and then I poked a hole under the plastic end. Now, I did not have shish kebab skewers, so I got creative and I'm using fondue forks. So I'll be inserting my fondue fork in through my metal end. And my skewer it. I just want to make sure I get it skewered a fair ways down the hot dog on that. It doesn't have to meet in the middle precisely. My other skewer through my plastic lid. Get it on this side. And then as needed, I can adjust my skewers to be able to center my hot dog. So I'm going to set it over here. The sun, we've got a little cloud cover, so we may or may not be able to finish up with the solar cooking. Worst case scenario is we stick it in with our tools or we stick it in one of our ovens. We just let it sit there and start cooking. Any questions on what we've got covered so far here? All right, if there's no questions, back to you, Nancy.
Sorry, we're sitting here talking about what food we're going to be eating. One thing I did miss a while ago, I want to add, and some of you may have seen me do it on the camera, is I like zucchini and the soup that I'm making. So I had some chopped up pieces of that, and I have added that to my soup. I failed to mention that a while ago. I have added that since I put the pot on. Spinach was also on the ingredient list, and I forgot to mention that. What I'm going to do with that is I'm going to wait to the end. It doesn't take long for that to wilt down, look real pretty in that pot. So I usually put that in the pot about 10 minutes or so before we're going to be ready to eat. So if you didn't see me do it, I won't lie. I added it to while you guys were busy making some other stuff. And if you haven't added it to your pot, you might want to go and throw it in there too. So we're all about eating these desserts. So we've got our lava cake on, but another fun thing to do, especially we've done this with kids, is to make what we call banana boats. So I'm going to sneak over here, and a banana boat is just that. We're gonna make a boat with this banana. We're gonna take the banana and just cut it right down the middle. Now we're not going all the way through. We're just gonna open this up right here. And this is a fun one to do with kids because you can add all kinds of stuff to this. I'm gonna open this up here. So basically, I got a nice trough here with this banana. And what I'm gonna add to it today is those chocolate chips. Remember how I like those. I'm gonna put a few of those in there. And I'm gonna show you a trick here. One of my camping hacks, when you get things like that that's loose and it's easy for them to fall in the package, find some of these containers like this. This happens to be a creamer container that we are reusing. So what I can do with this, especially if you got kids you're working with, like chocolate chips and those, a lot of times we may add Red Hots, or we may add some of those little Heath chunks in there, put them in something like this, and now all you got to do is pour it in there. I'll add a few more right there. Makes it easier to keep up with, makes it easier to store, especially if you're going to be out around that campfire, you got kids messing around, or if you're going on a camping trip. Makes it really easy to keep those put up and not lost and spilled out someplace. We're also, in this particular version, going to add some marshmallows to this. The little ones do work a little bit better here, because what you're going to want to do is to stuff those down in there. If you got the big ones, you can tear them up. That's what you got. Make use of it, because some of us may have those sitting around for the s'mores. But if you're just buying one to do this, then those little ones work really well, because we can just push them down in there and fill this banana up with some chocolate and those marshmallows. So looking good there. And this is where we're going to use our aluminum foil. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to fold this aluminum foil around and seal it up. I'm not going to make it real tight, but I do want to make sure I got my seals here. And we're going to put this on the fire, kind of like with the hobo meals. And what's going to happen is that's cooking. That banana is going to kind of caramelize, and it's really tasty. We were just sitting here talking about how we might take this and mix it with our lava cake later. Yeah, we got the sugar thing bad today. So we're just going to drop that in there where I know my coals are hot. Again, we've had this fire going, so we've got a pretty hot fire here. And we're just going to sit and watch this thing cook just like we are the other things around our campfire. Easy, easy. I'll be back. All right, y'all got banana boats going? I think we're gonna get with Carol. She's gonna show you a quick, easy way of making maybe some ice cream, maybe.
Someone asked if there was a drainage hole at the bottom of the pot.
I went ahead and
Oh,
answered
you
that,
got that. Okay.
Courtney. Yeah, so that pot that Brigida was using, I know she had mentioned that she had doubled that dough at the bottom, make sure nothing drained out. So that was pretty.
Gotcha.
Here we go.
But if Carol, I think she's unmuted now. So all right.
All right, we're gonna make ice cream in a bag. So there's a variety of ways that you can do ice cream in a bag. Of course, variety of flavors. I'm just making the plain vanilla right now. You can do it with a small coffee can and a larger coffee can. Duct tape it really well and let the kids play kick the can. I'm gonna make it with Ziploc bags and wrap it up in a towel just because it gets cold. And we're just gonna shake it for about 10 minutes. And then we'll have our ice cream. So I use freezer bags. I'm gonna make a double recipe here, but the recipe we sent out is a half cup of half and half, or you can use heavy cream. And the recipe calls for a tablespoon of sugar. And since I'm doubling it, put 2 in there. Teaspoon of vanilla. Zip that up, mix my ingredients. Now I've had some of these come apart because sometimes I give them to my young friends and tell them to throw the ball around. So I am going to duct tape the top for security because you don't want the salt water getting into your ice cream. So I have some ice here. And I could not find ice cream rock salt, so I am using regular table salt, and it works quite well. Put my milk in there.
put some more ice on top. Again, this is a freezer bag. Now my freezer bag was leaking yesterday, so I'm going to put another one for some double security here. All right, again, some duct tape. If you have people who are gentle with the shaking, you probably don't need the duct tape. Okay.
It also depends if you're going to be tossing it back and forth between people.
Now here's where you can put it in the paper bag, wrap it in newspaper if you're going to make it a ball for kids to kick around. It does get cold on your hands. And then you're going to shake for about 10 minutes. And in about 10 minutes, you can kind of squeeze your inner bag and see if it's solidifying. When you take the small quart bag out of the gallon bag, you'll want to rinse the exterior before you open your ice cream bag so that, again, you don't get salt into your ice cream bag. You can eat it right out of the bag, add your toppings into the bag, or if you're making a larger quantity to share, scoop it out and share around. Any questions on the ice cream?
How much salt was it that you used?
Well, I just kind of poured it in. I'll look at the recipe here and see what it recommends.
We're going to go look at the muffins. We're looking at the muffins while she's doing that.
That's fine. Man, they look good.
The recipe recommends 6 tablespoons of sea salt and 2 cups of ice, but it's also using sandwich size and a quart size. So you'll need to increase, if you're using the gallon size like I am, you'll need to increase the ice. So maybe double it, maybe the 12 tablespoons of the salt. But again, I tend to just pour in and not measure. But you do need enough ice, salt in there that'll help lower the temperature of the ice.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
I too eyeball it when I'm measuring my ratios.
And then it'll be back to Nancy. If there's no more questions, back to Nancy with the Dutch oven. You just kind of go past all of our food here.
All right. So some of you have been looking at us using this cast iron. So we thought we'd just spend a few minutes talking about the cast iron pieces that you might choose to buy if you want to. There's a lot of different companies out there that make cast iron these days. I know there's probably some name brands that jump in your head. There's a lot more people, different companies making this cast iron. It's become somewhat popular to use with some people. I personally prefer the older pieces. Older meaning things that were made back before the 60s. Those are kind of fun finds to get out when you yard sale or go to antique stores. The reason I kind of prefer those is, one, I kind of like the old stuff. It's just kind of my thing. We're into antiques and all that kind of fun stuff. But I also got into restoring cast iron. And the way I got into doing that was we found a couple old pieces in my grandmother's house that had been neglected, were rusted up. Didn't think there was any way we could ever make use of those pans again. And so we got to looking at how maybe you can restore different cast iron pans, and we figured out a way of doing that. And I took this, and I can't even give you, I don't even know how to give you an idea how bad this thing looked. I mean, it was completely rusted up. And we use a technique called electrolysis. If you Google YouTube, there's a lot of different videos on it. We use that, and it will literally pull all that rust off those pans. And when I was able to do that in that pan, and then reseason it, and it looked brand new once we were done with it. So kind of got hooked in just working with some of the older pieces, doing that. Redoing some pans that my family had, redoing some pans for family. So I prefer some of those older pans. If you pick them up and hold them, that's the thing you want to start thinking about. Whatever brand, whatever one you want to choose. A lot of times people complain about the reason they don't use them or they quit using them is because they're heavy. And they do have some weight to them, but that can vary a lot from company to company, from pan to pan. So I always tell people, pick it up and hold it. You know, if it's going to feel heavy to you just sitting there holding it, then you're probably not going to be likely to pick that pan up and cook with it. And some of those older pans, because they were handmade, are thinner and still really good pans. Even though they're thinner, that means they're lightweight. Good cooking pans, and they're lightweight. And if you look at close at some of those older pans, one of the differences too is, and if you choose to buy something new, is look at how it's finished. Some of the cast iron pans, if you look at them, they have a really rough looking finish to the top of them. What you want to look for is a pan that looks really smooth. Because another thing people sometimes complain about is things will stick. There's a couple tricks with working cast iron, and one of them that kind of gives you an advantage is if you start with a good pan. One that you're going to use because it's lightweight, but also looking for that smooth finish. And let me grab one of my pans real quick and I'll show it to you. I'll come back to you for you.
Okay.
And this one is not, got dust all over it, putting it here in the sun. But when I say a smooth finish, if you were to compare that to some of the newer pans, you might be able to see a difference in how these pans are finished. That's got that smooth bottom. There's no big rough. It doesn't look like sandpaper in there. So I like these pans because they become easier to season. And with that smooth finish, you can imagine it's a little easier to cook with sometimes if you're cooking foods that tend to want to stick. So it really is kind of a personal preference thing. There's a lot of companies out there that make good new pans. But if I was going out to buy a new pan, that's the two things I'd be looking for is, does it feel good in my hand? Is it lightweight enough? And I'm looking at that finish right there because I know that's going to make a difference when you start cooking with it. Now, as far as taking care of the cast iron, there's a lot of different thoughts out there. You know, having got into messing with some of the cast iron and restoring a little bit of it, I've gotten to know a few other people that like to do the same thing. And I don't know that any one of us do it exactly the same way. So it's just finding a way that works for you. A couple of things I would recommend is you got to think these pans, to get that seasoning to stick, you got to bring them to a pretty high heat. So using an oil, maybe for example, like olive oil, that doesn't take the heat very well. And when I say heat, you got to heat these pans up to 400 plus degrees to get that seasoning to stick. So using something that's going to take that heat a little bit more. I actually just stick to Crisco. That's what I use all the time on mine. So let's say I've stripped down a pan completely bare. All it is bare iron at that point. So I'm going to re-season it back up. So what I'm going to do is make sure my pan's good and clean, and I'm going to stick it in the oven at 200 degrees. I'm going to stick it in there for about 15 minutes. The reason I'm doing that is as the pan warms up, it's going to absorb that oil a little bit better. And I'm going to make sure my pan is dry. So that any heat there is going to make sure that pan is not holding any moisture from when I was cleaning it up. So once I've left it in there for about 15 minutes and it's picked up some heat so it can absorb that oil, I'm going to pull it out and I'm going to rub it down lightly with that Crisco oil. That's what I use. When I say lightly, you don't want it like caked on there. More is not better in this case. You just want it spread on there lightly. And you want to go on and wipe off any excess where you may see it like puddling up or anything like that. And I'm going to stick it back in the oven, but now I'm bringing the oven up to about 300. When I stick it back in the oven, I'm going to flip it over. So if there is any extra here that I've missed, it's now going to come out the bottom of the pan. So sometimes I will stick a cookie sheet, or if you got a piece of aluminum foil, something underneath there, if you think that might be a problem. I'm going to leave it again in here for about 15 minutes, 20 minutes or so, to make sure it's picking up that heat and it's giving it a chance for that oil now to start sticking. Now, for it to really bond to the iron, we got to bring this heat up even more. So after about 15 minutes, I'm pulling this out again. I'm going to take my rag, wipe it down, make sure again there's no excess oil on this to puddle up. And then once I make sure I got it all cleaned off, I'm going to stick it back in the oven. And now I'm bringing the temperature up to about 400 degrees. Some people go up to about 450. I don't seem to need to do that in my oven because I can smell it. And as it goes through the seasoning process, it will smell a little bit because you're bringing it to what they call the smoking point. So you're getting that pan pretty hot. Stick it in there. I usually leave them in there for about an hour, hour and a half, and then just turn the stove off after that and leave the pan in the oven. The reason you want to do that is because you have heated that pan up quite a bit. If you just pull it out and it cools down too quickly, that's when these pans can crack. And that's going to be a real bummer if you work really hard on getting that pan cleaned up and getting seasoning on it, and you pull it out and suddenly there's a big crack across it because it cools down too quickly. So a lot of times what I'll do is I'll get up and do this in the morning. So then it sits in there all day. So by supper time or whatever, it's done. A lot of times I will try to pick a day where the morning is cool enough that I can maybe pop a window or a door open. Because again, you can smell it because you are bringing this up to a pretty high heat. And I can pop that window open and let it sit. Now, if I have done this with a cast iron pan, I'm restoring it completely from the beginning. I'm going to do that process 3 times. That puts a good layer on there to start out with for someone who might be using this pan after I give it to them. Now, from that point, when I'm using my pans, sometimes I just eyeball them. A lot of these pans, that doesn't look like grandma's pans, got all like cake style stuff. Some of grandma's pans, it's been used for so long that seasoning's built up on it that it's like glass. I've got a couple of pans like that at home. That was my grandmother's. I don't cook with those over the fire because they're just too precious to me. But they're at a point where they really don't need anything from me other than to make sure I keep them dry and cleaned up a little bit. But these pans where I've restored them, every now and then what I'll do is come back in and I can look at it. And this one is actually looking a little bit dry where I've been using it. And after I'm done with it, I'll put it back on my oven or on my stove, and I'll bring the heat up a little bit. And once it gets warm, I'll just rub down the inside of it with that Crisco oil. And once I can kind of smell it, I know it's got hot enough now that that oil is bonding to the iron. I'll go through and make sure, wipe it out, make sure I don't leave any puddles in there, and then turn the stove off. Once I kind of see, sometimes you can get it to that point where you not only smell it, you may see a little smoke coming up. You just turn the oven off at that point. Make sure you've wiped it down so you don't have any of the puddling, and just turn it off and leave it and let it sit there. And so as I use these pans over time, I'm slowly but surely building up more and more seasoning on these pans. To clean them, I am all about just hot water. You know, sometimes if I need to clean them like that, just hot water and wipe them out. Now, if you do get a hold of something that is sticky, eggs are always fun. If your pan's not really seasoned up really well, if you're cooking something or frying something that's got a lot of seasoning in it, sometimes it can stick a little bit. So another trick here is, I think these are pretty common, or sometimes I just use the flat end of my spatula. It's got that rubber edge, and I'll just come in here and use it to scrape off any of the stuff that might be stuck on there. A little hot water will a lot of times bring that off. Sometimes people, if they're still really working on the seasoning in their pan, it's really stuck on there good, they're struggling with it. Some people will go on and put some water in here, put it back on the stove, and let that water come to a boil, and that's enough heat a lot of times to kind of pull that seasoning off of it. But most of the time, once you get a good base on it and that seasoning, a little hot water and a rag, sometimes you might use something like this or the edge of your spatula, and that'll pull that rest of that stuff off there that you want to get your pan cleaned out. Some people, like my grandmother, I think back and I'm like, I don't know that she ever cleaned her pan. She's one of those people that she cooked bacon in it and it sat back on the back of the stove, and when she was ready to use it again, it came back out. And that may work and it may be cool. A lot of y'all may do that. I like to clean my pans up. I don't know if I can handle it sitting there and knowing there's been food stuff in it without cleaning it. That's just me. But a lot of people will do that and they seem to get away with it. So there's a lot of different ways to take care of your cast iron out there. But my big things, I think, is making sure you work on your seasoning part of it. If you're starting with a new pan, even if you're starting with a pan you bought brand new off the shelf and it says it's pre-seasoned, it has a manufactured basic seasoning on it, and you're gonna think, okay, that pan's ready to go. A lot of times they're really not. It's just a base layer on there, and you're gonna get frustrated really quick. And I hate for people to get discouraged with using a cast iron because I love it. Every day I cook, there is at least one piece of cast iron on my stove. Is a lot of times that seasoning is just a base layer, and you got to keep working on adding more seasoning layers to it before it's really going to get good. The more you use it, the better it's going to get. With using your pan, the more you're using it, the more seasoning builds up on it, the better that pan's going to be. Those couple pans I have at home at this point, it looks like glass on there. I can do eggs, scrambled eggs, anything like that, and there's nothing really to clean up because it comes right out of that pan. So once you build it up, you can get a pan to that point where it's just like some of these non-stick pans that you might want to buy. Cast iron can be that way too. It just takes a little effort on building up that seasoning. Now I'm doing a lot of talking. Some of you may or may not have cast iron. Is there questions about how to take care of it, or cast iron that you might want to choose to use or buy? Or battery going? If you didn't catch it earlier, one of the things I would consider if you're going to buy one piece, you want to get started, I would probably choose, and if you want to do campfire cooking, is choose one of the Dutch ovens that has the legs on it, because now you got a piece you can either hang on your tripod or you can sit over the coals, because it's got the bail on it, it's got the handle on it, but it's also got the legs, so you got a piece of iron you can use in a couple different ways. So I love that bean pot. That's one I just actually finished restoring like a week ago. I've already lost count of how many meals we fixed in it because we've eaten over this campfire every meal this weekend. That's a great pan for soups and whatnot. But if you just want one piece to get started with, I would probably recommend those Dutch ovens. It's got that lip on it where you can put the coals on top of it, but it's also got the legs where you put coal under it. That number 10 is probably about as small as I'd want to go if you want to feed the family. I mean, it makes a good sized dessert for all of us. But if I was wanting to fix a soup to feed more people, that pot's not quite big enough. So that would probably be about as small as I'd want to go personally, depending on how many people you want to try to feed. So how about it? We got questions? Because I can rattle on about this cast iron stuff for a long time. This is one of my favorite things.
I have a question. I was wondering, you were talking about the electrolysis or whatever for the cleaning process. Is that something that you did at home, just like using it, or did you just get somewhere fed?
Can you repeat that last part? We're having trouble hearing you.
You have to take iron somewhere the electrolysis process for cleaning it. What's something you need to do at home?
You might have to type it. You're cutting in and out. We can't hear you. I'm sorry.
Yeah, something about the electrolysis, and if I'm hearing enough of it to kind of get the idea of the question. Electrolysis is something, it's a tank. Basically, some people will start with like a 5-gallon bucket. It's kind of hard to explain enough right now for you to probably get an idea how to build one, but there's a lot of good YouTube videos on there. If you're really interested in it, email me and I'll pull up a couple of the videos I've watched that kind of helps me learn how to do it. But you can build an electrolysis tank at home. What it involves is having something you can have water in, putting something in there like rebar is one. That's what I started with, and a battery charger. So you're basically creating an electrical current in the water. In the water you put washing soda, and it creates a current in there that literally pulls that rust off the iron, and it attaches to like the rebar in that case. That's what I started with. We started with a bucket with a rebar, hooked it up by watching those videos, and I could put a pan in there, and something about this size would fit, of course, in a 5-gallon bucket. I've since upgraded now to a watering trough. So yeah, I got it bad. I can put now, I don't know, 7, 8 pans in there when I really get to going. But it is something you can build at home. A lot of people will just use 5-gallon buckets. Now, if you get to digging and looking, other ways people sometimes restore cast iron. Grandma, grandpa may say, just throw it in the fire. The reason I kind of avoid doing that, you may get away with it, but sometimes what can happen is if the pan gets too hot, it can cause what we call fire damage to it. And you can sometimes pick up a pan and tell it's been in a fire that's been too hot because it will have a red look to it, especially on the bottom. And if you run your finger across it, it's not rust. That's a pan that's gotten overheated, probably by someone throwing it in the fire. Problem with that is it may cook fine for a long time, may not give you a problem. But that pan, there is some damage now to that iron, and it can cause the pan to crack or warp. And when I say warp, if you set a pan flat, it's not going to rock and it's not going to spin. Sometimes when we're collecting, we also look at what we call spinners. If you set it down flat on something and it spins like a top. So if you are going to buy something used, like you mentioned that, set that pan on something flat to make sure it's not going to, it's not warped and it's not. There's an echo there. Another way you may see people wanting to clean their pans is some people use what's called a lye bath, which really involves lye. Lye will work if you're trying to restore a pan that is just gunked up. All that seasoning's on there, it's just gotten to be too much on there. It will pull gunk off. It will not pull rust off. The E-tank will pull rust and gunk off. It will bring it back down to just bare iron to start with again. Some people will do that lye bath if that's the kind of pan they have. A lot of times when I go to yard sales or to auctions, I kind of have fun, you know, sometimes getting those cast iron pans really cheap because you look at it and it's a solid rust. Those are the kind of pans sometimes I'll pick up because I've got that E-tank and I know that it can clean it up. A lot of times those are pans people avoid wanting to try to restore because of that. Some people will also, if you get to looking, will use easy off oven cleaner, and it can be done. I personally just kind of avoid it because it's a lot of chemicals on a pan I'm going to be eating out of. So I'm picking the least invasive way of cleaning that pan. Once I do clean a pan, and if you are thinking about restoring pans, one of the things I will do before I season my pan, I've got it cleaned up. I will also do a lead test on my pans. And you can buy those little lead kits like you would test for lead paint in an old house. And I'm going to run that across the inside of my pan. The reason I want to do that is because back in the day, and even I guess now, some people will take these cast iron pans, and you would think something like this you wouldn't do this with, but they do. They'll melt down lead to make lead fishing weights. And they'll sometimes use those cornbread pans. I mean, they'll use these different pans, and that's what they're doing. They're melting that lead down. Of course, if there's been lead in this, it's not a pan you're going to want to eat out of. Out of all the pans I've restored, and I've lost count now, I've maybe found a handful that had lead on them, and at that point, to me, they're useless. I think all of them I've given away or maybe sold something to somebody who was going to paint them or do something else with. Some people will go in, and I've done it too. We'll all go in and we will drill a hole through this pan so that it cannot be gooped up and used again. So someone couldn't pick it up and not do a lead test on it, ended up using a pan that could cause them to become sick. So always do the lead test on them if you're going to choose to try to restore some of these older pans. So there's a lot of different ways of doing it. The electrolysis thing, there's a little bit of effort to it. There's some pretty good YouTube videos out there, but it does a really good job. If you've got some place and the method of putting that together, it does a really good job of cleaning up pans.
Renee said, I'll trust you ladies, but that sounds like it'd have to be followed by don't try this at home, water, metal, and electric.
It's not that bad. It's not, if you're using a battery charger, so it's not that much electrical current. I can grab the wires on it, and it doesn't, I mean, you would feel more if you went out here and grabbed the electric fence that your brother dared you to grab hold of. It doesn't, it's not that much. So yeah, I mean, it's not that big a deal. Trust, it really isn't. I mean, if it's something you want to do, I prefer to use electrolysis. One, because of the number of pans I do restore, but also because it does a good job, and it's really not that hard to do. Once you get your setup, that's the hardest part, is just getting the setup. Once you figure out how you want to do that, then at that point you've got a tank that you can use for as long as you want to use it. Cool.
Very cool.
Was that questions?
She's giving you a thumbs up.
She's still iffy about it.
No, she was basically thanking you for that information, I think. Yeah. She's cooking on the stove as we speak as well, so she's a busy mama right there.
Speaking of cooking on the stove, another thing you'll hear people say is if you got a glass top stove, you cannot use cast iron. That's a lie. I have a glass top stove and I use it every day. The only thing is I'm a little bit more careful about just grabbing the pan and pulling it off so I don't scratch out the top of it, but they'll work. I mean, I've never had a problem with using my cast iron on my stove, and I've used pans like this. I've also used I've flat Dutch ovens that I put on there before to cook soup in. So if you're thinking you can't use cast iron because of that, I just like I said, I'm a little bit more careful about dragging it across it, but you can cook with it on glass of stove. So now we're close on time. How about our ladies in Indiana? How's the food going?
There we go. Here's our feast. We have our bean pot and our chicken pot pie and our cornbread and our muffins, our hobo dinner, our pizza. And we lost our son, so we're just cooking the hot dogs in the fire. And Brigida's over here making some more pizzas for when my hungry family gets home. And my ice cream, I still need to shake it up some more. So thank you for allowing us to participate. We've had a fun weekend.
Yes.
Hey, Nancy, I'm trying to answer one of these questions. They said, please put the, it's 15 minutes on 200 degrees, then 15 minutes on 300, and then an hour and a half on 400.
Yeah, that's what they call the 200, 300, 400 method, or 234. Again, if you're looking at cast iron stuff, what to do online, you may see that reference. And again, different people will do different things. And I'm not saying any one way is better than the other. Some people just stick it in there at 450 degrees and go with it. That's the way I've been doing it, and it seems to work well for me. It's not the only right way. I mean, there's a lot of people who restore cast iron different ways. That's just what works for me. So that's what I do and always recommend for other people to do, because I know that it works because I've reseasoned now and cleaned up so many pans. 200, 300, 400 method is what a lot of times you'll see it if you look it up online.
That food in Indiana looks delicious.
I'm tempted now.
You ready to look at the pot?
Let's see what we got here. Where's my lid? It's over there. You got it? Fingers crossed. Thinking happy thoughts. Oh, sweet. Pink chocolate lava cake is good. Stir this pot around. Y'all hungry yet?
Started.
All right. Is there any last questions for us? I know we're out of time. We've used up all y'all's time. We do want to respect that, but we don't want to cut anybody off if they've got questions or want to know a little bit more about what we're doing or how things are going with the cooking on the meals. Everybody good? More questions?
Thank you all did a fabulous job. Thank you very much. My mouth is watering and I wish it wasn't raining here so I could be cooking with you.
I think the good minds are thinking alike because we got put cornbread in our reflector oven as well. It's not quite done yet, but.
Miss Renee says thank you all.
You're welcome. All right, ladies. We appreciate y'all hanging out with us. It's been fun. We wish you were here with us, but hopefully we give you some good ideas about spending some time outdoors cooking. If you are still with us this afternoon, we're not done yet here at Curry. We're gonna be talking about some fly fishing later today. So if you're in on that class later today, you got to put up with us a little bit more. Guys, thank you all very much for hanging out with us, and hopefully you all enjoy some good meals together as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Lots of thank yous in the thing. Where is Curry? It is in Marshall County, Kentucky.
We're in the far western part of the state.
Right on Kentucky Lake.
We actually have 3 camps in Kentucky. This is the one we had hoped everyone would be able to be at this year for our 25th anniversary. Is that it? Yeah. We have 3 camps in Kentucky. This is the one in the far west. We have one in the far east called Camp Webb. It's on Grayson Lake, not too far from Ashland. And we have Camp Wallace, which is in south central Kentucky. It's on the shores of Lake Cumberland. This is the one, Camp Curry is my personal favorite because it's where I've worked for 20 years. So.
Awesome. Well, I don't see any more questions rolling in, so I'm going to go ahead and end it. Again, thank you to the presenters and, of course, everybody watching. Bye, guys.